Welcome back to another Nature's Always Right episode with Stephen Cornett. Today we're getting into my favorite survival crop, sweet potatoes, and one of my favorite crops to eat as well. I love sweet potato fries, and I've really been enjoying the last month or so as I've been harvesting mine. So today I want to tell you guys more about growing sweet potatoes and how to propagate them more easily. And we're going to go ahead and harvest up my 30-foot bed here and see how many I grew this year. Now I know that they're ready because the deer have been coming and eating all the leaves off. We're in fall, in the middle of October now, so it is time to harvest. You want to get these out of the ground before the first frost. So wherever in the world that you're growing, that's the big key, get them before that. And as you get better at growing these, you're gonna notice if you let them grow too long, and we'll probably see them here, you'll get super big ones. But that's not the end of the world, because those super duper big ones are great if you have a bunch of guests over, you want to make a bunch of mashed sweet potato. And those big ones are also really great for making your sprouts to grow your new sweet potatoes next year. And that's what I've been practicing the last 3 years with potatoes, sweet potatoes, turmeric, garlic. I'm really trying to get good at all these different crops that you can grow a large amount of, eat them throughout the year, and then save some of your crop as your seed for the next year. So let me share with you my little tip on how to propagate these more easily and save you a step. Before I show you that trick, let's just pull up one of these. It can vine out and grow sweet potatoes farther away, but the main amount that you're gonna find will be right underneath the plant. And I'm harvesting these at a great time. So you can plant your sweet potato at any point at the beginning of spring. I even did these in the middle of summer. I'm trying to remember if it was, I want to say it was like July. I planted them a little later than I normally would. And by harvest time, you know, this is a great size sweet potato. So if you're struggling to figure out when to plant things, when to harvest things, and how to keep track of all that, check this free digital calendar and planning system out called seedtime.us. And what you do is you give it your zone, your zip code, and it figures out what your spring and fall frost dates are, and you're able to change them as well and customize them. Then you can add the crops that you want to grow. Everything's customizable, but it will set up things automatically for you, depending on the location that you give it. So if you're doing transplants, you just need to tell it how many days until the transplant will be ready to put in the ground. If it's direct seed, it'll do it automatically for you. So for sweet potatoes, it's 42 days till the slips will be ready, and then it auto calculates everything. And check this out, guys. It shows you, here's where you need to start your slips. This is where you need to prepare your beds. This is when it needs to go in the ground. And then here's when you're going to harvest it, etc. So it's a really fantastic way to organize your garden life digitally. It's totally free. Just go to the link down in my description. You'll even get $5 off in seeds. Play around with it and see if you like to use it. These are great at in-ground beds. You can also put them in your raised bed. They work great, but just understand that you're wasting kind of a lot of space to these. So think about something vertical that you could plant with the sweet potato. This will stay along the ground. Maybe some peppers or kale that's grown up taller, corn, or maybe you have some trellised tomatoes, cucumbers, anything that's gonna have vertical space. The sweet potato could grow right underneath that and do pretty well as long as it's not being shaded out too much. Now, I like to plant my sweet potatoes about 2 foot apart in the row. And I do 2 rows down this 30-foot bed. And then I do the diamond pattern that you guys see me do a lot. This is the tightest that I would want to plant them, but I do about 2 foot apart in the row. And then I do it in the middle, so making that triangle shape that I always talk about with you guys planting. The triangle shape is about 2 foot apart from the other sweet potatoes as well. And that seems to give me the maximum yield that I'm able to get. Rather than just doing 1 row down the center, I find that this works extremely well. So what I'll do is I'll go store these in my garage where it stays really cool through the winter. And what will happen the following season is if you put these into, so if I just use one of my, these are bootstrap farmer trays, 1020 trays. And if I just put a bunch of soil in here like this and get it wet, and I put the sweet potato and nuzzle it down in here, what's gonna happen is this plant will put a little bit of roots and it will cause it to put out new sweet potato plant. So the vine will come out with a leaf on it, and typically what people do is they'll pull these off and put them into water to root them out. But I've figured out that you can skip a step if you keep the soil really high up on the potato and keep this wet. The plant that comes out will actually start putting off roots right here at the site where it's coming out. And what I did this last year is I just pulled that off with a small amount of roots and I put it into the soil. So I also experimented with one of the slips, which is, the sprout, that's the specific name, with no roots. I just pulled it off and I put it into wet ground, and it was able to produce roots in the ground and grow into a plant. A few of these down here are those. I think I had maybe one die, so you don't want to do this in the middle of summer when the sun's just beating down on the plants. But when it's a bit cooler in May, June, you can actually just pull it off and plant it. You don't actually even have to root it. But what I liked to do is to leave it on this a bit longer so it develops some roots in your seeding chamber here. So you could have a bunch of sweet potatoes in here just like this, and they'll all put off slips, allow them to generate a little bit of roots, and then go out and plant them. And then that's gonna save you the step of having to deal with rooting them out in water. So any steps that you can avoid in farming and gardening is just nicer, right? We wanna eliminate as much work for ourselves as possible. So that is how I grow my sweet potatoes. All right, let's go ahead and harvest these right now, and we'll see how many we get. And if you're wondering what these plants are behind me, this is my turmeric that I grew. It's amazing. I already harvested a couple of my plants, but I'm waiting till we get closer to the first frost before I harvest them all. And I started to make OHA, an Oriental Herbal Nutrient, and I made the turmeric as part of my tincture for that process. So I'm really excited to have the medicinal benefits of turmeric. And I'm gonna have enough seed for next year to do another 30-foot bed. Plus, I might even be able to sell some to you guys. So stay tuned for that next spring. I know where I planted these, right? Sometimes you might not know. So you can pick up the vines and follow them back to the center where the mother sweet potato was. So when you pull them out of the ground, you just wanna be careful not to snap them in half, because that would really reduce the shelf life. Okay, so just kind of grab them and wiggle them. This one's more in there. Sometimes, so see how I broke that one? This will develop a skin, it'll cover over and heal. But the most you can avoid that, the better. As I harvest them, I'm just gonna brush off the dirt, and I store them like this. I don't go ahead and wash them or do anything crazy to them. I just get that dirt off. So the vines we're gonna set to the side for now, but when we're all finished at the end, we're actually gonna put the vines back on as a natural mulch that will sit here over winter and degrade. It'll help protect the soil and the microbes in the soil and feed them a little bit of nutrients back. But these are great sizes. I planted way later this year, and I'm kind of liking that I did that, because then I don't really need to pay attention to when I'm harvesting, like the harvest window. I just wait till the deer come, eat some of the leaves, and then I just say, all right, frost is coming, middle October, let's go ahead and get these out of the ground. So the reason sweet potato are my favorite survival crop is because they're extremely easy to grow. They're essentially zero maintenance. They're very easy to store to the next year, much easier than potatoes. They produce even more food than potatoes, regular potatoes, and they have a great nutrition profile as well. And when speaking about nutrition, one of the great things is that sweet potatoes are not in the nightshade family. There's a lot of people that have issues with nightshades. So potatoes, eggplant, peppers, tomatoes, these are examples of nightshades. It's very common that people have issues digesting them. So that's something you can look into, doing an elimination diet. If you're concerned that you do have certain food allergies, that's a great one to try and start with and see how your body responds to that. And then I've got two types of sweet potatoes. I think it's called Beauregard. I think that's the name of the white one. I can't remember. I got my original slips from a local hardware store who was selling them. That's where I get my onion sets every year as well. After you've harvested them, just pile the soil back up and flatten it out. Final step is just gonna be to throw all the vines back on the soil. as a natural mulch. So here's how much I got from this bed. It's an okay amount. It's not super productive, but as my soil gets better, things will grow better and better here. So let's go see how much I got. We're gonna go weigh everything, and I'll also tell you about storing these so that you can plant them next year. All right, you guys, let's quickly go over storage and the most important part, curing. Now, I have stored potatoes and not cured them. They store great, they still taste great, but if you want your sweet potatoes to be as sweet as possible for those starches to get converted into sugar, you need to cure them. So I'm gonna show you 3 different little ways that you can do this really simply. And if you want to clean off your potatoes, just use a rag like this. You wanna be careful not to damage the outside of the skin, but if you look at some of these potatoes, just have a little bit of dirt on the outside, that is totally fine. So the curing process is a 2-part process. And the first part, you need to keep your potatoes at 85, 90 degrees and 85 to 90% humidity for about 7 to 10 days. 7 days is totally enough time. Now, that can be pretty tricky, especially in the fall. But I'm gonna show you a really great way to do this in a minute. But if you don't have any special equipment or anything like that, here's the most inexpensive way. So what you can do is just, if you have a bunch of plastic bags, is put your sweet potatoes in those, tie them up, and then put them in a room where they're gonna get a lot of sunlight, and that will create a greenhouse effect, creating a lot more temperature in the bag and more humidity. Maybe poke 1 or 2 holes in here just so it doesn't get too crazy humid. Another way you could do it is put them in a insulated bag like this. Also put them under the sunlight in your warmest room in the house. And that will work well. Now let's go check out the best way to do this and how I'm gonna set these up this year. So if you have a greenhouse, this part of the curing process is an excellent place to do that. But many of us don't have a greenhouse. So we're gonna create a greenhouse here in our garage with an igloo, some seedling heat mats. Many of us do have the heat mats, or they're very inexpensive to purchase. These are great to use at the beginning of spring when you're trying to get your seeds to germinate. So it's always a good idea to have some of these. I'll put some in the description if you guys want to check them out. So inside of this cooler with the heat mats, it actually gets quite warm in here. And these heat mats are automatically set to go to 85 degrees, which is exactly what we want. Now I'm gonna do one more thing because we need that high humidity, right? So I'm just gonna take a glass jar and set it on top of the heat mats so that it can heat up that water and it will create more humidity in our igloo chamber here. So one word of caution to you guys, if you are using a super insulated cooler like this, the heat will build up and it will stay in here really easily. Now you can also use just a plastic tote, which doesn't have insulation, and that will allow the heat to dissipate a little more. So if you're using something like this, just keep an eye on it each day and make sure that the temperature's not going too hot or it's not getting too humid in here. And what I'm actually going to do with my, my water container here is I'm gonna take it out after about 12 hours because that will build up enough humidity in this thing. And the potatoes, once they get wet, you'll see some wetness on them. Take that out of there because that should be enough humidity to hold in there to keep it where you want it. And just check it each day, put your hand inside of here. And I'm also gonna prop the door open just with a piece of wood being put right here, okay? And that's gonna allow airflow to get in here so that the humidity doesn't build to a crazy amount, okay, where the potatoes would rot. All right, so that's a few tips for you guys if you wanna try to build a setup like this for yourself. Let's go ahead and get our sweet potatoes in, and then this is all set up, and we'll set a date on our calendar 7 days from now where we can take them out and start the second part of the curing process, which is much easier. We'll take them out, I'll put them back into the milk crates, and then they just need to sit at around 60 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 to 8 weeks. Now at this point when they come out of this part of the hot part of the curing process, you can eat them right away. But the final part of the curing process in this cool area in this garage finishes them out and will get them to last for you for a very long time and have the sweetest flavor. And these will of course be able to sprout for you in the spring as well, doing that technique I showed you earlier. So we got 52 pounds of sweet potato, so that's fantastic. I'm gonna have enough to eat through the winter, plus enough to start my plants for next year's growing. And this is what's been so fun, is being able to grow all my own potatoes, garlic, now turmeric, all from my own seed the last couple years. And I just keep expanding it with my garlic. Check out my garlic video if you want to learn more about growing garlic and storing garlic.